Your mind is a neurological system that can be programmed, reprogrammed, and directed. It is not a being with its own independent will. It is not you. It is a tool, an incredibly powerful one, but also easily influenced if you don't take control of how it operates. And I'm not saying this from theory, but from the reality of thousands of hours studying the brain and human behavior. I want you to visualize this clearly. Your brain never stops working. Every passing second, it processes millions of signals from both the external and internal world. It generates thoughts, emotions, memories, predictions. And if you don't actively direct it, the entire system will operate on a default mode shaped by your past experiences, old beliefs, fears, reflexes. From a neurological standpoint, this is the result of neural networks reinforced over time, following a principle called Hebbian plasticity. Neurons that fire together wire together. If you consistently respond negatively to pressure, your brain will build a neural shortcut. Every time stress arises, the limbic system, the emotional center, immediately takes over. The reaction kicks in before you're even aware of it. You get angry without knowing why. You procrastinate without knowing where to start. That's when the mind is running you instead of you controlling it. But here's the good news. You can absolutely change how your nervous system responds. Instead of being passive, you can actively form new connections and break old ones that no longer serve you. This process is called intentional neuroplasticity, and it begins with the awareness, I am not the mind, I am operating the mind. You can train this through very concrete steps. First, you need to create a pause between stimulus and response. When an anxious thought appears like, I can't do this, don't rush to react or resist it. Observe it as if you were watching an electric signal move across a screen. And this isn't just meditation, it's a neurological technique. When you observe instead of react, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, evaluation, and behavioral control. In contrast, if you allow the reaction to run, you're reinforcing the emotional reflex circuits. I've witnessed this in functional neuroscience experiments when someone trains the ability to notice thoughts without identifying with them. After just a few weeks, brainwave activity in the control regions increases noticeably. They stop reacting impulsively. They develop the ability to choose a response. And that becomes a turning point in how they live, work, and make decisions. You don't need to wait until you feel ready to begin mastering your mind. Readiness is the result of training, not a prerequisite. Every time you take a step back and ask, what am I thinking? Where is this coming from? Is it helpful? You're reprogramming your brain. Every time you pause a negative reaction, you're building a new connection between the control center and emotional center. And if you repeat this enough times, your mind will shift from autopilot to goal-driven tool. A common mistake I see many people make is thinking that the mind has to be silent before they can control it. No, the brain never stops working, and it's not meant to be silent. Your goal is not to stop thinking, but to consciously guide the flow of those thoughts. Just like you can't stop ocean waves, but you can learn to surf them. You can also learn to ride your thoughts instead of being swept away. And here's a truth that must be said plainly. If you don't control your mind, someone or something else out there will control it for you. Social media, collective fear, constant information consumption models. Your nervous system is extremely programmable. If you don't build an internal regulatory system, you'll become a product of your environment instead of the architect of your own life. That's why actively shaping your thinking isn't just a healthy lifestyle, it's the core structure behind performance, confidence, and inner power. Every result you create, focus, perseverance, resilience under pressure, comes from how you process those initial neurological signals, your thoughts. I want you to carry this with you after this reading. Your mind is not the truth. It is a model. It reflects the world you once believed in, experienced, and repeated, but you can change that model. You don't have to believe everything your mind tells you. You only need to choose what aligns with the life you want to live. Start today. not by trying to empty your mind, but by becoming sharply aware of each thought and consciously choosing how you respond to it. You're teaching your brain every day through every choice, every tiny reaction, and it is precisely there that freedom begins. You may have never seen a thought. It has no shape, no sound, no defined color. But I can tell you from decades of brain research, every thought you have leaves a specific biological trace in your nervous system. And if you understand that, you will never again dismiss what's going on inside your head. When you think of something, even for a few seconds, a chain of physiological reactions immediately begins. A specific group of neurons in your brain fires. Related regions, like the prefrontal cortex, logic processing, basal ganglia, habit formation, or amygdala, emotions, join in. Depending on the content of your thought, neurotransmitters like dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, or norepinephrine are released in different proportions. But you think it's not important? Let me be clear. If you repeat the same type of thoughts for many days, like worrying about failure, fear of judgment, or feeling not good enough, you are building a dominant neural pathway. Neurons that fire together wire together. Over time, those thoughts become familiar, easily triggered, quickly reinforced. You start thinking it's who you are, but in truth, it's just the product of repeated neural activity. On the other hand, if you intentionally nurture positive, specific, structured thoughts, such as, I am learning, I am improving, I am not my past, I am capable of overcoming this, you are sending your brain a different signal. And here's what matters. The brain doesn't distinguish between real experiences and deliberate imagination. If you vividly visualize something, the brain still responds as if it's really happening. That's why Olympic athletes train through visualization. And it's also why repeated negative thoughts can trigger stress responses, just like living through a real trauma. I recall a patient who participated in a cognitive rehabilitation program in my lab. He suffered from chronic anxiety, even though his external life was stable. Every day he repeated to himself, I'll fail. People will find out I'm not good enough. I'll be rejected. We didn't ask him to just think more positively. Instead, we retrained his brain using 2 steps. Recognize the dominant thought patterns and intentionally replace them with new thoughts, repeated every morning. After 6 weeks, MRI scans showed decreased activity in the amygdala and increased engagement in the executive cortex. And most importantly, that patient said, I feel like my brain has changed direction. I share this with you so you understand you are not stuck in old thought loops. You are constantly reprogramming yourself every minute. And that doesn't require blind belief in positive thinking. It requires strategy. That's why I want you to remember, every thought is a real neural signal. Treat it as seriously as you treat your diet or physical training. So what can you do today? First, start with acknowledgement. When a negative thought appears, don't push it away, don't judge it, observe and name it. This is fear of failure. This is a defense mechanism. Naming it with language is enough to shift neural activation from the emotional center to the rational control center. Second, reframe the content. After naming it, ask, what do I want to program in its place? Write your answer down. Be specific, be positive, be grounded. Instead of I'll fail, try, I'm building skills. Every attempt is progress. That sentence isn't just optimistic, it carries biological truth because learning genuinely happens through feedback. Third, repeat with intention. You don't need hundreds of thoughts each day. You only need 3-5 core statements, repeated like a morning ritual. Write them on paper, place them where you'll see them upon waking. Let your brain breakfast. On the right, mindset before the world floods you with chaotic signals. Fourth, ask yourself each night, what did I program into my brain today? This question brings you back to the role of the intentional operator, and when you begin to sleep with a deliberately trained nervous system, your sleep will reflect that. deeper, more restorative, emotionally balanced. I want you to understand, you can't completely eliminate negative thoughts, but you absolutely can choose which ones get reinforced. The brain is a learning system. It learns based on what you repeat, not what you thought once, but what you think the most. From today onward, you are no longer just a thinker. You are the engineer of your own nervous system. And every thought is a line of code. If you choose to code for strength, confidence, and perseverance, your entire life will begin to operate in that direction. Not overnight, but steadily and irreversibly if you persist. There's something I want you to be honest with yourself about. When something unexpected happens, how do you usually respond? Do you stay silent and endure it? Do you get angry and push back? Or do you retreat into old habits, seeking temporary safety? Most people believe that the outcome of their lives is determined by big events. But from a neurological perspective, I can tell you this. True victory doesn't come from extraordinary moments. It comes from the small responses you control each day. Your response to pressure, to failure, to rejection. That is where real strength begins to form. I'm speaking directly to you, not anyone else. What you do in the first 90 seconds after a negative event will determine what you're reinforcing in your nervous system. Will you let it drag you down, or will you pause, breathe, and choose a more constructive response? We can't control every circumstance, but we can train how we respond. And that's not just a beautiful idea. It's a neurological reality. Every time you face a stressful situation and still manage to stay calm, you are activating and reinforcing the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for awareness and behavioral regulation. At the same time, you're weakening the fear reflex coming from the amygdala. Over time, you build a solid biological foundation for composure and resilience. I've seen this repeatedly in elite athletes, in special forces soldiers, in people with PTSD, and in myself. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to train the ability to control your reactions. It's a skill you can learn, it can be changed, and you can begin right now. Be honest with me. In the past 7 days, how many times did you react instinctively and later wished you had responded differently? How many times did anger, insecurity, or anxiety take control of your words and actions? A few moments come to mind. That's perfectly okay. It means you're becoming aware of where you can begin to reclaim control. And I'm here to remind you, you are not your old reactions. You are the capacity to restructure them. A simple technique I often teach is creating a conscious pause before reacting. Just 10 seconds. When something upsets you, don't respond immediately. Place your hand on your chest. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds. Hold for 2 seconds. Exhale for 6 seconds. Repeat twice. In that moment, your nervous system shifts from sympathetic, parasympathetic, calm, and recovery. This not only soothes your emotions, but also opens up a cognitive space where you can choose instead of being swept away. And remember, choosing not to react negatively doesn't mean you're weak. It means you are stronger than your immediate ego. You're mature enough not to react just because you're provoked. That is neurological agency, not passive surrender. I want to pause and ask you this. If you truly want to change the way you respond to life, do you dare to begin today? You don't need a grand plan, just a small, clear commitment. If you're ready, leave a comment below with just one word, I dare to change. Or simply type the number 1. So I know you're here, that you're present, that you're choosing not to let the old mind define who you are for one more day. I will read every comment because I know sometimes one small action, a word, a number, is enough to open a new path. Thank you sincerely for having the courage to face yourself. Not everyone dares to do that. And I want you to carry this with you. Controlling your reactions is not about suppressing emotions. It's the ability to shape your responses to serve your values and goals. You may not always choose your circumstances, but you always have the power to choose who you become after that first reaction. Each day, you'll face countless situations, from someone frustrating you in traffic to an unexpected email that stirs anxiety. In every one of those situations, you can become your old self, responding from old programming, or you can become the person who is rewiring their nervous system one response at a time. Science has given us the tools, willpower gives us choice, and daily awareness is what will shape the rest of your life. Mastering emotions doesn't mean you stop feeling, nor does it mean trying to stay calm by repressing or denying what you feel. True mastery means understanding where your emotions come from, why they appear, and choosing how to respond in a way that best serves your nervous system, your actions, and the outcomes you're aiming for. From a neurological perspective, emotions are not something that just come and go. They are the product of a physiological chain reaction starting with perception and ending in behavior. When you feel anger, anxiety, jealousy, or hurt, these are not vague feelings. They are specific responses involving the amygdala, hippocampus, orbitofrontal cortex, OFC, and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. Every emotion has its own neural map. The problem is, if you don't understand this mechanism, you will live by instinct. Emotion rises, you react. And each time, you're not only reinforcing behavioral habits, but also imprinting a neural pattern that makes that emotion more likely to return in the future. That's why anxious people get more anxious, angry people become more explosive, not because they're weak, but because they were never taught how to navigate emotions at the mechanism level. So if you truly want to master your emotions, the first thing you need is the ability to identify your state. Not I feel bad, but I'm feeling disappointed because my expectations weren't met. Not I'm annoyed, but I'm reacting to a sense of being disrespected. Accurately naming emotions shifts brain activity from the primitive center, amygdala, to the executive center, prefrontal cortex. From there, you stop being led by emotion and begin to observe and reshape it. Next, you need to understand a key principle. Emotions are messages, not commands. When you feel anxious, the brain isn't saying stop. It's saying something's unclear, clarify it. When you're angry, the brain isn't commanding attack. It's warning that a boundary might be violated. If you hear the message, instead of getting caught in the reaction, you begin to reclaim mastery. Another important part of emotional mastery is recognizing that every emotional state has a cycle. A strong emotion lasts on average 90 to 120 seconds. If you don't prolong it with ongoing thoughts, what extends an emotion isn't its initial intensity, but the way you feed it by replaying stories, ruminating, or resisting it. This is known as the neural reactivation loop. So what are effective strategies? First is the observe, describe, redirect sequence. When an emotion arises, describe it in precise words. I feel tension in my neck and chest. I sense my stomach tightening. Then ask yourself, what is this signal trying to guide me toward? Instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, just pausing to describe and ask already alters the emotional cycle in the brain. Second is intervention through physical behavior. Emotions are physiological states, so shifting physiology helps regulate emotions. One technique I often recommend is the double inhale. 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This technique quickly activates CO2 reduction mechanisms and calms the nervous system in seconds. Use it the moment an emotion peaks. Third, reframe the narrative. Cognitive reframing. Every negative emotion is tied to a story. If you can change the story, you can change the state. Instead of I was insulted, try I'm learning to control my reaction to inappropriate behavior. Instead of I failed, say I'm gathering data to refine my method. These small changes in language create major shifts in how the brain encodes the experience. And most importantly, mastering emotions isn't about eliminating negative feelings. You can't completely remove fear, anger, or sadness, but you can learn not to be ruled by them. That's the goal. That's inner freedom. When you know you can pass through an emotion without being overwhelmed, you become resilient. You become the leader of your nervous system instead of its victim. Emotional mastery is a skill of those who truly know themselves. It doesn't require toughness. It requires honesty about your inner states and enough clarity to navigate them. This won't happen in one try, but with every moment you pause, observe, and respond consciously, you are reprogramming the old reflex, and each new reflex becomes a solid step on your journey to mastering your life. Focus is not something you either have or it's not an innate trait. Focus is a form of neural energy that can be built, depleted, and restored, just like any muscle group in your body. And just like physical training, if you don't actively train your focus, it will gradually weaken over time. The first thing you need to understand is this: focus is the result of inhibition, not force. When you focus, your brain doesn't light up all regions at once. On the contrary, it shuts down unrelated areas to funnel neural energy toward a single target. This is done through a mechanism called top-down control, where the prefrontal cortex regulates the nervous system and shapes where your attention is directed. And do you know what disrupts this mechanism? Fragmentation. Every time you check your phone, switch to another browser tab, or allow yourself to be pulled by unrelated information, you're teaching your nervous system, I prioritize reaction, not depth. This doesn't just affect your focus in that moment, it rewires the entire neural map related to attention. I'm not telling you to eliminate all distractions. What I'm telling you is this: you need to build a system for training focus, just like you build muscle at the gym. So how do you train it? Start by clearly distinguishing between two states: attention and focus. Attention is your ability to perceive multiple surrounding factors. It's an open energy state. Focus is the ability to narrow neural energy into a single point, like a laser beam. In this era of information overload, many people remain stuck in the attention state without ever entering true focus. The result is diffusion, exhaustion, and a lingering sense of never fully completing anything. The biological mechanism behind this involves two systems: the noradrenal system, which regulates arousal and motivation, and the acetylcholine system, which allows your brain to tag, "This is what matters most right now." When you enter a state of deep focus, acetylcholine surges in specific neural regions, strengthening connections and enhancing memory and learning. But this only happens if you sustain your focus long enough, at least 25 minutes of uninterrupted work. One strategy I often use is to design a neural environment. Before starting any high-focus task, I remove all distractions. Phone on airplane mode, door closed, no background browser tabs. Then I set a specific block of time, usually 90 minutes, for uninterrupted deep work. This is the optimal duration in line with ultradian brainwave cycles. When dopamine and acetylcholine levels peak during that work session, resistance will arise. Your brain will create urges to shift, check notifications, or take a break. But that is exactly your training ground. Every time you return to the task instead of giving in to distraction, you're strengthening the executive control regions of the brain while weakening the fragmentation reflex. Over time, you not only improve performance, you rewire your nervous system to support depth over surface level activity. And don't forget a key factor: sleep. Without quality sleep, your ability to focus will collapse no matter how strong your willpower. Sleep clears out neuroinhibitory compounds like adenosine, restores baseline dopamine levels, and rejuvenates behavioral regulation capacity. Want to focus well during the day? Start by prioritizing the quality of your sleep at night. In addition, light is a powerful tool. Let your eyes be exposed to natural light right after waking, at least 10 minutes each morning. This helps synchronize your circadian rhythm, improves baseline cortisol levels, the alertness hormone, and elevates wakefulness and focus during peak activity hours. Finally, you need a mental warm-up ritual. Before starting any deep focus session, engage in a repeated behavior, like sipping tea, playing calm background music, or writing a goal-setting sentence. This repeated behavior acts as a neural signal. It tells your brain now's the time to channel all energy toward a single goal. Repetition builds neural links, And over time, you'll find it easier to enter a focused state. Remember, focus doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from the system you build. And like any biological skill, if you don't train it, you'll lose it. But if you dedicate time each day to training, you'll gain one of the most vital superpowers of this century, the ability to go deep in a world addicted to shallow. I want you to understand this clearly. Your nervous system reacts before you even realize what's happening. That's not a flaw. It's a biological mechanism that helps you survive through millions of years of evolution. But the problem is, in modern society, where pressure no longer comes from predator claws, but from unanswered emails, judgmental glances, or a tone of voice that makes you feel hurt, those primitive reactions are no longer appropriate. And if you don't learn to observe, understand, and reset them, your nervous system itself will become the barrier to your growth. When someone does something that hurts you, your brain activates the amygdala, the emotional center, especially responsible for fear and anger. It signals your body to react instantly. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your voice rises, your muscles tense up. All this is to prepare you for two primitive options: fight or flight. But you're not in a jungle. You're in a meeting room. You're at a family dinner. And if you keep reacting the old way, the consequence is not just embarrassment, but the repetition of endless, unresolved cycles. Here's the key. You can't stop your brain from reacting, but you absolutely can reset that reaction through awareness. And that process begins in the prefrontal cortex, the center of decision-making, analysis, and emotional regulation. Every time you choose not to react immediately, you are strengthening this brain region. Every time you pause for a few seconds to breathe, to ask, does this reaction serve what I truly want? You're creating a new neural net. And the beautiful thing is, your brain is always listening to you. It learns through repetition. Whatever behavior you repeat, it will reinforce into reflex. If you allow emotions to take over, that reflex will become impulsive reactions. But if you intervene consciously, the new reflex will be calmness, intelligent response, deliberate choice. You don't need to become someone without emotions. You just need to be someone who chooses their reactions. I know you've been in moments where you blurted something out in anger and later regretted it. You've done things only to ask yourself, why did I act like that? The answer isn't because you're weak. It's because you haven't been properly trained to install a new reflex. Then here's how you can start. Step 1, identify the emotion the moment it arises. Silently say to yourself, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling triggered. Naming the emotion helps the prefrontal cortex regain control over the emotional center. Step 2, interrupt the reaction loop with a simple action. This could be taking 3 deep breaths, changing your posture, or looking into the distance for 5 seconds. The goal is to create space between stimulus and response. Step 3, ask a directional question. Ask yourself, will what I'm about to do bring me closer to my long-term values and goals? If the answer is no, choose a different response. Step 4, repeat this every day. You won't see results instantly, but after 30 days, you'll be surprised that little things no longer throw you off as they used to. You'll find yourself calmer, clearer, and more proactive in every situation. Remember, you don't have to change your whole self overnight. You just need to begin with one moment where you pause instead of react. One moment where you breathe instead of raise your voice. One moment where you ask a question instead of acting on impulse. And with every one of those moments, you're rewriting your nervous system's operating code. Modern neuroscience calls this intentional neural restructuring. It's like you're no longer driving on autopilot, but starting to steer at every turn. You become the driver, not a passenger riding along with your emotions. You might ask, can I really do this? The answer is, you've already done harder things. You've survived thousands of moments where you lost control. Now it's time to reclaim it. And no one else can do that for you. You can start today. The next time an emotion rises, pause, name it, breathe, choose your response. Each time you do that, you're not just changing that one moment. you're reshaping the person you're becoming. Don't just react, respond with intention. Don't let your old nervous system pull you back into your old self. Teach your brain that you and only you get to decide how you respond to life. That's how you begin the journey of mastery, not with sudden bursts of strength, but with consciously trained reflexes. Day by day, no habit is formed in a day, and no habit can exist without the nervous system's agreement. I want you to see this clearly. Every behavior you repeat is not just a choice. It is a neural structure being reinforced, rebuilt, expanded, and automated each time you perform it. Behavior at its core is not merely an expression of personality, it is the product of an equation. Behavior equals neurology plus repetition. When you drink a cup of coffee at the same time each morning, when you check your phone reflexively even when there are no notifications, when you tense up every time you hear criticism, that's no longer random behavior. That is a chain of neural reflexes that has been systematized over time. The question is not, do I have habits, but rather, what kind of habits am I allowing to run my life? From a neuroscience perspective, behavior is reinforced through a process called myelination, where neural pathways are wrapped in an insulating sheath called myelin, allowing signals to transmit faster and more efficiently. Every time you repeat a behavior, that neural pathway becomes more well-paved. It's like walking the same trail so many times that eventually, the moment you stand up, your feet automatically head in that direction, even if you no longer want to go there. This is why change doesn't come from determination, it comes from deliberate repetition. If you want to reshape any mental habit, such as stopping negative reactions, forming a positive mindset, or persisting through challenges, you don't just need to understand emotions or motivation, you need to intervene at the behavioral level and restructure it from the root. Where do you begin? With 3 steps. Observe, intervene, reinforce. Step 1, observe. You cannot change what you haven't identified. Choose one specific mental habit you want to shift. For example, you tend to doubt yourself whenever you face a challenge. Write down what you're thinking in that moment, how you feel, how your body reacts, and what your next behavior usually is. This is not a guilt exercise. It's field research. You're working directly with your own nervous system. Step 2, intervene. Once you identify the old reflex chain, insert a new behavior, even something very small. For instance, instead of saying, I'm going to fail, stop and say, I'm learning how to face this. Or instead of scrolling your phone out of boredom, stand up and walk for 2 minutes. The goal is to create a signal disruption, forcing your brain to reselect a path instead of defaulting to the old one. Step 3, reinforce. Every time you perform the new behavior, acknowledge it. A simple way is to mark it on a calendar, write down how you felt after the new reaction, or say out loud, I'm rewriting my neural map. Becoming aware of the new behavior not only registers it, it generates internal dopamine, which powerfully reinforces positive neural connections. I want you to understand this clearly. Neuroscience doesn't care whether you really want to change. It only cares what you're doing, what you're repeating, and that determines who you become. You can write pages of commitment, set goals every new year, but if your daily behavior doesn't change, your brain will never rewire your identity the way you want it to. On the other hand, you can start from the smallest actions, like placing your phone 1 meter away from your bed, taking 10 deep breaths each morning, or saying, I'm ready instead of I'm nervous. And over time, those behaviors will redefine your entire neurological identity. Another important point, you need to build a supportive neural environment. Environment is not just physical, it's your schedule, the people you engage with, the way you talk to yourself. Each of these either supports the construction of new habits or reinforces old patterns. Clean up your environment, externally and internally, to make space for new neural models to form. And finally, accept this truth. You will fail a few times. There will be days when you don't act the way you want. But don't misunderstand that. Every time you get up and try again, your nervous system still records one crucial fact. You didn't give up. And it's that consistency, not perfection, that rewrites your internal operating system. You can become anyone, not by imagination, but by changing how you act each day. When behavior changes, neurology changes. When neurology changes, you change. And once you change, your entire life transforms with you. This isn't theory, this is science. And you are the one practicing it right here, right now. If you're waiting for inspiration to begin something, then I want you to look directly at the truth. Inspiration is the most unreliable component in the entire human operating system. It arrives unannounced, leaves without warning, and has no consistent rhythm. Meanwhile, everything solid in your life, your health, your work performance, your identity, comes from systems, not fleeting emotions. Think back to the times when you felt highly motivated and thought you could do it all. You enthusiastically started a workout plan, wrote down a list of goals, set an alarm for 5 a.m., but just a few days later, inspiration quietly disappeared, and you returned to your old habits. Not because you were weak, but because you never had a stable neural system to sustain behavior without needing motivation. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Your brain doesn't need inspiration to act. It needs clear signals, simple structure, and predictable patterns to operate consistently. Systems are what enable you to act even when you don't feel like it. Systems are automated mechanisms based on schedules, environments, and feedback loops. They don't ask whether you're in the mood. For example, if you wait for inspiration to sit down and write or study, you'll be entirely dependent on fluctuating mental states. But if you designate a fixed time block each day, create a dedicated space, eliminate distracting devices, and start with a repeated ritual, like sipping tea or playing a specific music track, you're setting a trigger, an automatic behavior activation, and over time, your nervous system learns, at this hour, in this condition, it's time to switch into work mode. A good system doesn't require you to feel excited each time you act. It only requires that you show up. A simple structure, fixed time, specific initiation behavior, no decision making. Like brushing your teeth, you don't need inspiration to do it because it's a neurological reflex built through thousands of repetitions in a stable environment. The problem is, most people live with the expectation, I'll start when I feel inspired. That's a formula for procrastination, not growth. You don't need inspiration to start. You need a system to sustain, and that system must be clear enough that your brain doesn't need to decide each day. One of the most common mistakes I see in intelligent, ambitious people is that they constantly build expectations without building systems. They spend too much energy thinking about the best version of themselves, but commit to no specific schedule to become that person. Yet success doesn't come from who you think you are. It comes from how you act every day without being guided by emotions. So what kind of system works best for the nervous system? First, it must have consistent timing. The brain loves circadian rhythms. If you work at the same time daily, your focus will increase over time because your body is accustomed to that cycle. Second, the system must have a low activation threshold. Don't expect to write 1,000 words immediately. Just open your laptop, set a 25-minute timer, and write anything within your ability. Easy initiation is the most crucial factor in building behavioral loops. Third, the environment must be consistent and optimized to eliminate distractions. There is no neural stability if each time you sit down to work, you're faced with dozens of small decisions like where to sit, what tools to use, or what music to play. Fewer choices equals more energy for the core behavior. Finally, effective systems always come with clear feedback and small rewards. Your brain learns best when it knows what's working and is acknowledged. A short journal entry, a check mark on a calendar, a quiet self-acknowledgement, all reinforce the system you're building. I want you to start looking at your day not through the lens of do I feel inspired, but with the question, do I have a system clear enough to act? And if you don't yet, you don't need to change your whole life overnight. You just need to choose one behavior. Design one schedule and stick to it no matter how you feel. Stability doesn't come from enthusiasm, it comes from commitment. Remember this, successful people don't act when they feel inspired. They act to trigger inspiration. And the difference lies in this, they put the system first. Because they understand that emotion is a variable, but systems are foundational. And only a foundation can support something that lasts. You don't have to feel ready. You just need to build a system that makes action inevitable. And if you do that long enough, you'll be the one inspiring others, not through words, but through the way you live. We often mistake adversity for something that destroys people. But from a neurological perspective, adversity doesn't automatically break you. It merely delivers a signal. And what defines you is how you respond to that signal. When you face difficulty, your body and brain aren't saying, this will kill me. They're saying, this is something I don't yet know how to handle. And it is in that very moment that your nervous system gets the opportunity to rebuild or to repeat the old patterns. Imagine your nervous system as a map connecting reflexes, emotions, and decisions. When you encounter adversity, rejection, misunderstanding, lost opportunities, major mistakes, that map gets shaken. The familiar routes no longer work. You can't respond the same way. But instead of collapsing, if you can withstand the discomfort and not react immediately, you're opening a phase known as the neuroplasticity window. During this period, the brain becomes highly flexible. It starts to ask, is the old reflex still useful? Is there a new model that works better? And if you proactively direct your thoughts, behaviors, and responses, you're not just overcoming hardship, you're reshaping the very system that governs yourself. This is a mechanism called neuroplasticity under stress, the brain's ability to reorganize itself under intense pressure. That means adversity isn't bad. It's a rare opportunity to rewrite patterns that have long been locked in place. The danger doesn't lie in adversity itself, but in repeating old reactions to it. If you continue getting angry, withdrawing, or self-blaming, you're reinforcing a neural pathway that's already fragile. On the other hand, if you learn to observe, pause, and respond consciously, you are rebuilding your nervous system on a stronger foundation. And I want you to understand something deeply. Resilience is not the absence of pain. It's the ability to stay present inside the pain. And presence is a neurological skill. It's built through the moments when you don't run away from discomfort, but endure it, face it, name it, and then choose action instead of automatic reaction. There's a very important mechanism called prefrontal override. The prefrontal cortex's ability to intervene in emotional reflexes from the amygdala, but only if you train it consistently. Every time you take a deep breath instead of yelling. Every time you write down how you feel instead of shutting down. Every time you choose to have a conversation instead of avoiding it. These are the moments your prefrontal cortex strengthens and you become someone who directs emotion, not someone who is a victim of panic-driven neurology. The core message is this: you don't need to eliminate adversity. You need to learn how to move through it with a proactive mind and a trained response system. Your nervous system doesn't hate pressure. It hates ambiguity. So give it a clear structure. When difficulty arises, instead of asking, why me, ask, what can I control in this moment? And begin from there. You must also understand this essential truth. Real neurological growth happens in a state of stress, but not collapse. If you're too comfortable, your brain doesn't learn anything new. If you're too panicked, your brain will only focus on survival. But if you stay in the challenge zone, where you're forced to adapt, but not overwhelmed, that's when neuroplasticity happens at its strongest. This is why adversity isn't just a test, it's a gym for your brain. Every time you dare to step into it and act with awareness, you are upgrading the core mechanism of your life. You're turning hardship into learning data, something your nervous system can use to operate better in the future. I know you may have gone through emotional shocks, losses that words can't describe, but trust me, you don't need to overcome everything all at once. You just need to adjust your reaction in each moment. Each breath you choose to steady instead of pant. Each step, you choose to move forward instead of retreat. Each decision, you based on your values instead of passing emotions. That's how you rewire your internal operating system. Adversity does not define you, but how you respond in adversity does. Every choice you make when everything seems to fall apart is a brick you lay in building a more resilient nervous system, a clearer identity, and a more intentional life. You don't need to avoid hardship. You need to step into it with a different mindset. Not to prove anything, but to build yourself from within. Because ultimately what makes you strong is not a peaceful environment. It's a nervous system that has learned to stay grounded no matter what happens around you, and that is real strength. Discipline is not just a habit, it is a neurological structure. If you find yourself unable to stick to something long term, whether it's exercising, writing every morning, learning a new skill, or simply keeping a promise to yourself, the problem is not weak willpower or lack of motivation. The problem lies in your nervous system not being properly programmed to support that consistency. And the most crucial factor that helps you maintain any behavior over time is the environment you build around yourself. In neuroscience, we have a concept called context-dependent plasticity. The brain's structural changes depend on context. This means your behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is always influenced by physical surroundings, time of day, light, air, devices, people, even scents and background sounds. And if you want to build real consistency, the first thing you need to do isn't try harder, but redesign the environment so your nervous system isn't constantly forced to make the wrong choice. Let me give you a simple example. If you plan to write every morning, but leave your phone on the desk, keep Wi-Fi on, and have no set time frame, you're asking your brain to fight off dozens of stimuli just to maintain a single behavior. And since the brain can't spend energy endlessly, it will quickly choose the path of least resistance, abandoning the behavior trying to sustain. That's not a personal failure. It's a reasonable neurological response to a faulty environment. To build sustainable discipline, you must change the environment first, then the behavior. And within that environment, 3 core elements must be clearly established. 1, constraints. The brain performs better within tight boundaries. You need time constraints. I do this from 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Choice constraints, only one app, one device, and goal constraints. Focus on one main task only. Constraints don't make you weaker. They prevent your brain from scattering its energy, which in turn builds endurance. 2, initiation cues. The brain needs a clear signal to shift from rest to action. A consistent song, a familiar scent, a specific physical gesture, any of these can become a neural cue if repeated regularly. When this cue appears, the brain knows it's time to focus. No further decisions required. 3, feedback and reinforcement structures. Every repeated behavior must be paired with positive feedback. This doesn't require big rewards. A simple positive note, a check mark on a board, a verbal "I did it" is enough for the brain to release a small amount of dopamine, creating a light sense of satisfaction that's crucial for sustaining behavioral change. This is why I call it neurological discipline, not because you force yourself, but because you design conditions where your brain naturally wants to repeat the behavior. True discipline doesn't come from willpower. It comes from a nervous system that no longer faces internal conflict every time a behavior begins. And to achieve that, you must control the context, not just your intention. A fascinating study showed that people trying to build new habits, when placed in low distraction environments with specific structure, maintain behavior 5 times more successfully after 6 weeks compared to those who relied solely on motivation. That proves one thing: environment beats emotion, and systems beat intentions. If you're serious about any goal, health, career, personal growth, you need to build an environment that leaves your nervous system with only one choice: the right action. And to do that, you must begin answering very specific questions. What time do you start your task? Where and under what conditions? which devices should be present on your desk, which ones should be removed. What cue will initiate your focus sequence? After finishing, how will you acknowledge your completion? If you haven't answered these questions, you don't yet have a discipline system. You're just fighting temptation with willpower, and willpower has limits. But the nervous system, if trained in the right environment, can sustain behavior long term without you having to push yourself every day. Stop blaming yourself when you lose discipline. Instead, examine whether the environment around you is supporting a stable nervous system. If it isn't, stop trying to win in an ecosystem that works against you. Rebuild that ecosystem. From there, you won't have to fight yourself daily. You'll just need to show up at the right time in the right condition and let your trained nervous system take care of the rest. That is the true foundation of consistency in every situation that happens to you, good or bad, unexpected or anticipated. What shapes the quality of your life is not the event itself. It's how you respond to it. This isn't a motivational slogan. This is a proven neurological mechanism. Every external event is merely input. What determines whether you become stronger, distressed, clear-headed, or overwhelmed is the neurological output you create from within. From the brain's perspective, every time you encounter uncertainty, bad news, criticism, failure, rejection, your nervous system begins processing the signal through the amygdala, the emotional center. Instantly, it sends signals to other regions to prepare one of three responses: fight, flight, or freeze. This is an ancient reflex, but here's the problem. If you don't intervene, this reflex will dominate your entire biological and mental state, even when the situation is no longer a real threat. So how do you respond correctly? First, you need to reclaim control from the circumstance and bring it back to your internal control center, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that allows you to ask questions, analyze, assess, and choose a response rather than react automatically. And every time you do that, you're sending a signal back to your nervous system saying, I can control the output. I am not a victim of circumstance. In reality, many people don't break because the situation is too bad. They break because they allow that situation to activate old reflex patterns they don't control. They fail to distinguish emotion from reality. They don't pause to create space between stimulus and behavior. And it is precisely in that space, even if just a few seconds, that you can insert awareness, choice, and inner strength. That space is where real power lives. A resilient person is not someone who has an easy life. It's someone who can create stable responses in unstable situations. You can't control what others say, how the market shifts, or what life throws at you, but you can always control the response model you train every day. Here's how you do it. 1, identify the trigger. Every time you feel yourself on the verge of reacting negatively, name what's triggering you. I feel tense because I was misunderstood. I feel disappointed because the result didn't meet my expectations. Naming the emotion is how you stop it from taking control. 2, create a neural pause. Take a deep breath and wait just 5-10 seconds. This small technique allows the prefrontal cortex time to reactivate, helping you make a better decision. Studies show that even a 10-second pause can change the entire chain of behaviors that follow. 3, ask quality questions. Does this reaction bring me closer to my goal? Will I be proud of this action an hour from now? Is there a more courageous choice I can make? These questions shift you from emotional reactivity to cognitive awareness. 4, act consciously instead of reflexively. You can choose silence over anger. You can choose to send a polite email instead of a bitter message. You can choose to walk away and maintain your boundaries instead of trying to explain yourself endlessly. And each of these actions is a clear declaration that you are no longer letting circumstances control you. The beautiful truth is, every conscious response you make, no matter how small, changes your neural structure. You are reprogramming your entire stress response model, strengthening your prefrontal cortex, and reinforcing the identity of someone who is self-governed. Gradually, the old reactions that used to exhaust you will lose their grip because you've upgraded your internal processing system, and that's when you begin to realize You don't need to wish for life to get easier. You just need to get better at responding to whatever happens. That is the spirit of every strong nervous system. Response is power, not circumstance. The question is not what happened to me. The real question is, how will I respond in a way that builds who I want to become? When you answer that question with intention, day after day, you don't just survive. Victory is not a destination. It is a mindset you must reprogram every single day, every single moment. Because your brain does not operate on the past, it runs on present states. And what you repeat today will determine your neural reflexes tomorrow. So no matter how strong you've been, how many challenges you've overcome, or how disciplined you once were, none of that matters if you don't recreate it again today. From a neuroscience perspective, victory is not the result of one grand decision, but the outcome of thousands of micro decisions you make in each passing moment. Every time you choose focus over distraction, action over procrastination, response over reaction, you are reinforcing a neural pathway. The more it is reinforced, the more it becomes a neural highway in your brain where winning behaviors occur almost automatically. This explains why successful people don't need motivation to show up daily. They don't have to constantly convince themselves to try. They simply activate a mindset that has already been trained. And you can do the same if you learn to reestablish your winning mindset as a neural habit. There are 3 key mechanisms to help you do that. 1, reactivate your identity every morning. Identity is a set of beliefs you repeat about yourself, and your brain behaves according to those beliefs. If you believe you are decisive, you will act decisively. If you believe you are disciplined, you will be less susceptible to temptation. This begins with a simple morning ritual. Affirm yourself through language, action, and physical posture. You don't need to shout in the mirror, but you do need to be clear in your thoughts. I am the one who owns today. I act according to purpose, not emotion. Manage your physiological state. You can't maintain a winning mindset if your nervous system is depleted. Sleep, morning light, physical movement, and nutrition directly affect your ability to sustain focus, regulate emotion, and make decisions. Specifically exposing yourself to natural light in the first 5-10 minutes of the day, practicing deep breathing, and keeping your body active help shift the nervous system into a proactive mode, high but stable sympathetic mindset, which supports a leadership mindset. 3, reassess your direction every hour. A winning mindset can't be sustained if you drift through your day unconsciously. You need strategic pauses to realign your behavior. Every 60-90 minutes, stop and ask yourself, am I acting from intention or impulse? Am I reacting or leading? Is what I'm doing taking me where I want to go? This self-reflection brings you back into active control instead of being pulled by automatic reflex loops. Real-world victory does not come from grand stage moments. It comes from repeatedly defeating subtle inner weaknesses every hour, every day. It's when you wake up early, even when you're tired. It's when you don't give up, even when the work yields no immediate result. It's when you continue doing what's right, even if no one praises you. All of this, when repeated, becomes a powerful neural network where your identity is embedded as a new cognitive map. But here's the most important part. You must understand that a winning mindset does not appear by chance, and it does not last unless reestablished. Just like muscle, if you stop training, it weakens. And mindset works the same. If you stop reminding yourself who you are, stop controlling your behavior, stop maintaining inner discipline, your brain will revert to old patterns and you will lose yourself. I share this with you not to pressure you, but to emphasize a hopeful truth. You can reconstruct any mental model you want whenever you choose. Even if you've lost control for a long time, as soon as you start again, your nervous system will respond because the brain is always learning, always adapting, always rewiring. What you need is a decisive choice and a repeatable system. A winning mindset is not a lucky state. It is the product of discipline, awareness, and the environment you create. And you can begin shaping it right now by choosing one specific, decisive action that reflects the person you want to become. Because ultimately, what defines you is not what you think, but what you repeat in silence every single day. And when a winning mindset becomes your default reflex, you no longer need to try, you just need to continue being yourself. A version of you designed to be grounded, precise, and unshakable amidst a chaotic world. If you've made it to this final part with me, one thing is certain. You are not someone who drifts aimlessly. You are someone who seeks to understand yourself more deeply, someone who wants to live consciously rather than reactively, someone who wants to master your nervous system to create results instead of blaming circumstances. And that is a monumental step, because you are stepping out of a world of unconscious reaction and into a world of intentional action, choice, and evolution. We've journeyed together through the layers of how the mind operates, from how thoughts shape behavior to training focus, managing emotion, rewiring reflexes, rebuilding neural habits, and designing a winning mindset. None of this is just theory. These are operating systems you can reprogram for your life starting now. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You just need enough awareness to realize every moment you choose a different response, a better behavior, a healthier habit. You are reprogramming your entire future, not through wishful thinking, but through the actual formation of new neural circuits shaped and reinforced by every repeated action. I share this story with you not to convince you of some distant idea. I tell it because I believe in you. I believe you are smart enough, strong enough, and ready enough to stop living another day under the control of your old unconscious. The world may not change to suit you, but you can change the way you operate within it. And if you've been waiting for a sign to begin, this is it. Pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, how do I want my brain to operate from today onward? Then get up, choose one specific action, and begin retraining yourself. You don't have to do everything at once. You only need to do one right thing with awareness and commitment. I'm here to tell you this. You can absolutely win if you learn to master your nervous system. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your persistence in learning. I wish you health, clarity, and an iron will on the path you've chosen. And if what you've just received is valuable to you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a sign, a comment, an action, a step forward, so I know you're still here, still becoming the leader of your own life, because life always rewards those who dare to act. And I believe you are one of them.